This is White Wolf von Atzigen up here in Vermont with Ways of the Wild Institute, and this is just a little short continuation video of the pre-snow shelter that I did my last video on. Those of you who watched it, you know that the shelter that I have built right here is for a winter stay. Okay, it's for when the snows come, pack up around it and bury it. This shelter right here, it will keep out mild rain, but it will not keep out heavy downpours. And it is also quite large for a debris snow shelter. So, you know, to heat this up in the middle of winter with your own body heat would be, or not in the middle of winter, as it is now. Okay, if the temperatures dropped dramatically, it'd be hard to keep this warm with your own body heat because it's quite large and there's not enough insulation on the outside to trap your body heat inside. Now, but anyway, that's all explained in the first video, so I'm not going to get into that again. But what I wanted to show you here is kind of how I'm constructing the door, okay? Because of course with a winter shelter you want to have a door on there, and that you might have noticed in the first video there was no door, it was just a big open hole. And so why don't we take a closer look here at what I'm doing.
Alright, just to reorient you, again you see that I used a lot of rocks around the bottom of the shelter. Why? Because they're available, they're right here, so why not use them? And I've got a mixture of debris on there between leaves and pine boughs. Now what I did here for the door is I took this pole right here and I stood that up, and it's a Y on top. And then what I did is I took this pole here and I placed it in that Y and ran it down on an angle into the corner. And that cuts my doorway in half. And then what I did is I went ahead and put the long piece of hemlock right here in that Y and ran it across into the shelter, on the outside of course. And on top of that, you'll notice I've got 1, 2, and I think there's a third one right there that you can see. Those are poles running from the ridge pole, which is the spine of the shelter, out to that piece of hemlock. Alright, so those are attached to that ridge pole, which is going through that ash tree. Now on top I took slabs of wood, bark, whatever I had, and I layered that on. Now there's about 4 layers of slab wood on top of that. Now recessed from that, I started my cross pieces. And of course I put some more support poles in the bottom here that have some more Ys on top and little hooks to latch them onto. And so that's basically just the framework for the top half of the door, because I certainly don't need that huge opening in winter. And I went and gathered some more pine boughs, and I'm going to layer those on top of that lattice work now.
Really, it's just a matter of weaving. So you take these, you know, because pine is very flexible, spruce, fir, whatever you have in your area, notice all the tops of the evergreens I want to tuck underneath this shelf. Okay, I don't want any of them going over top, because then the snow will get in between there and then run down behind. So, and the sheer weight of the snow will just pry those boughs right off there. So you want to make sure to tuck those underneath the top.
I got the pine boughs all layered on there, nice and thick, all tucked in up here. And then what I did is I just plugged some of the bigger holes with clumps of wet frosty leaves. As you can see here, big thick leaf plugs. Pretty much the same thing I did with the whole rest of the shelter, even up on top there. You know, thick plugs of leaves. Now that's a much more manageable door for this kind of shelter. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some big pine boughs and overlap them on there. That'll keep the snow. Well, what it's going to do is going to give the heavy snows kind of a just a little structure to lean against, so they don't actually fall in and blow into the shelter. And the pine boughs will keep the snow building on the outside, and that way later on, when the snows get deep, what I can do is come back here and I can dig down in to that door, move the pine boughs out of the way, and crawl right in through there. Alright, so basically what I'm relying on is the snow to create the plug for the door. And all I'm going to do is create a tunnel big enough for me to crawl through on my belly to get in there. That's all I'm looking for. Okay, the outside here is pretty much done, and the half door that I built over there is also pretty much done. I just have to drag in those long boughs to place on the outside for when the heavy snows come. Now, a lot of people say, well, you know, that's a big shelter. How the heck are you going to stay warm in that? Well, that's the neat thing about this type of shelter. Now, anybody who's seen my other shelter videos or have taken my shelter classes here in northern Vermont understands that in the winter with a debris hut you need at least 4 feet of insulation on the outside and insulation packed on the inside, you know, debris to get into and stay warm, you know, with your own body heat. So the shelter has to be small enough to heat up with your body. This one is, you can see when I was standing next to it, is quite large. Okay, so you say, well, how do you stay warm? Well, that snow, remember that snow is going to come in here and it's going to pack on top of here. The snow is going to insulate. Okay, everything that's on here now is simply to keep the snow on the outside of the shelter. But what's on here now isn't really meant to insulate in brutal cold weather. But the snow that this shelter will trap and hold and build up around it, okay, it'll turn this whole thing into a big snow mound. That snow is very insulating. And that's what's going to keep my body heat in there. Especially when the snow plugs up this door and all I have is a tiny little hole to crawl in and out of. See, with a snow shelter, you've got to dig way down to the earth. And if you can't, and even if you do, you've got to put a good 6 inches of pine bough or evergreen boughs in there to keep yourself off the snow, because it'll suck the heat out of you. But see, this won't have any snow in it. And I'll drag some grasses and leaves in here in a little while. But the earth itself, even when it's frozen, will radiate your heat back up out. Especially if you have some leaf or grass debris on top of it. So between the snow on the outside and dry leaves and grasses on the inside, and the snow plugging your door nice and thick, and then you can take whatever you have at the time, you know, to plug that little hole that you crawled through, you're going to stay warm in there. And say, well, what about light? You know, a lot of people think you can't have any source of flame in these shelters. Well, generally speaking, yes, that's true. Okay, because obviously it's made of highly flammable material. But what you can do is build yourself a little rock oven inside. I'll show you how this works. Now I'm inside the shelter right now, and I've got a little fire going in here. Now, you know what? I might have to grab a little flashlight because I don't know if you can see how I have this built or not. Looking at the screen, it doesn't appear that you can see anything except for blurry flames. Alright, well, hold on a second. Let me grab a flashlight and see what I can show you. Alright, so here's my door. I am in the shelter, and just on the inside of my door I have a flat rock, which is right there. That's the bottom rock, and that's set up on small rocks underneath, so there's a space under it. And then I've got large flat rocks standing up all the way around it. There's the back rock. I've got side rocks. So there's rocks completely surrounding it. And then on top, I've got more flat rocks. I've got a double stack up there. That means the very top rocks are not going to get very hot, especially with the size fire that I will be having in here. Alright, so that really is, and none of the rocks are touching the shelter. There is space all the way around the rocks. But again, even with the size fire that I'd be having in here, these rocks aren't going to get near hot enough for anything that would be touching it to combust. But again, just to be safe, I made sure that they're not touching anything. And have I done this before? Yes, it works. This one here is not a trial. Now, in here I've got some, you know, sticks and a birch bark roll that I just rolled up, and I'll put a flame to that here in a minute. But the main purpose for this is, yes, you can have a little fire in here, and it will give you light inside your shelter when everything is packed in. And also you'll say, well, you know, what about smoke? Well, right now it's not really a big deal because there's plenty of ventilation in here, and the smoke just rises and goes right out. However, if you look straight up this ash tree above, right there, directly above this fire is a hole that I left at the very bottom crook of that Y in the ash tree. That is the smoke hole. And again, it's at the highest point in the shelter. Again, directly above the fire. But really, what this is for is a coal oven. So if I have a fire outside, what I'll do is I would shovel coals on a rock or a piece of bark, whatever you have, inside, and I would pile the coals on that flat rock. Now those coals, you know, if I pile them on there real good, those coals will continue to burn and smolder. They will heat the rocks around it like a convection oven, and then those rocks and those coals will radiate heat into my shelter. That's simple. And if you're bringing coals in and you've got all these rocks around it, you have no chance of catching anything on fire, right? Because they're contained inside that rock oven. And of course, the opening to the oven is facing inside my shelter towards me, so I'll also benefit from the warm glow of the coals. So it will give me a little bit of light as well. If I need to have some brighter light for a moment or two, I can easily put a few twigs or some birch bark or whatever I have on top of there, burst it into flame, and it'll give me a little light, and that smoke will go right up and out that that smoke hole, which is in the Y of the tree. And again, that will not get covered with snow, and if it does, I can just poke it out. Okay, why? Because it's underneath my ridgepole. See, there's my ridgepole right here. So that's underneath the ridgepole and between the two sections of the giant ash. So that will remain open unless I purposely close it. So that is how you can get heat and light inside a debris type shelter. Now let's get that lighted. Okay, so I got a fire inside my rock oven, which is inside my pre-snow debris shelter. And you can see all the rocks that surround the fire completely. Smoke is coming out and going straight up. And it is a heavy gray cloud day here in the mountains of Vermont. There's a low pressure, there's in no way a nice clear high pressure day, so it's not like we have that working for us. Pretty simple. And just that little bit of flame in there, I can feel the heat. It's coming right off the right off that little bit. Now just imagine if I had a pile of coals in there. If I had a pile of coals, I could get it really warm in here. Alright, so I'm going to wrap it up here. There's the part 2 of my pre-snow shelter. And hope you enjoyed it. I thank you for watching and continuing to support Ways of the Wild Institute here in Vermont. Again, if you want to learn anything else about what we do here, why don't you take a visit to our website, Ways of the Wild Institute. We've got lots of stuff on there, regular blogs, I post videos on there, lots of courses, workshops, lots of stuff on the store pages. So yeah, go ahead and check it out. And this will probably be the last video I post until after the holidays. So again, I wish you all a very safe and happy holiday season, and hope you get a little snow. Hope we get some snow. It's been exceptionally dry here. Very, very unusual for this time of year. Normally I'd be working in knee-deep snow this time of year, but we've got a dusting on the ground. That's it. So hopefully winter gets here sometime soon, and then we can start playing in the real snow. All right. Take care. Ulla Mollison. Be well and happy.